Well, as you've just heard there, the ANC's weekend policy conference will be an opportunity for the party to reflect on its role in society and map out a plan for the next 5 years. Issues like the step-aside rule will likely be fiercely debated at that Nasrec event. We're joined now by political analyst Dr Dale Mckinley. Dr Mckinley, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. Of course, part of what this protest by staff of the ANC presents is really a moral question and perhaps even a crisis for the party. I was reading one of the placards. I made a note of it. I just want to quickly read out what it says. And it says, you know, the party has the most uncaring leadership for staff welfare. And that's a placard held up by a member of staff of the ANC. And yet, this is an organization that will look to South Africans and say, trust us, vote for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a continuation in some ways of the trust deficit that the ANC has been accumulating over the last many years. When a party promises a lot of things, and we're about to start a policy conference, and promises service delivery, promises that not a single cent will be spent on mismanagement, or there will be no corruption in PPE during the COVID, and it happens exactly the opposite. Now it's salary staff, and this has been an issue for the ANC for a long time. People then, not just the staff members, but ordinary people, the public and others, get the real sense that the ANC leadership in particular is saying one thing and doing another. They're basically contradicting themselves, and they're hypocrites. And this is, I mean, that's a harsh criticism, but I think in the reality of the situation, if I was a worker at the ANC right now and I looked at a gala dinner where people are probably eating something that costs almost a month's salary for an average worker, and you're not getting paid, I would think there's something seriously wrong.
This weekend, of course, is going to present a number of contestations on the policy front. No doubt that this issue of the step-aside rule will come under great discussion, I suspect, not just within those closed sessions, but also outside.
Absolutely. I think this is the real sort of, you know, this is where the battle is going to take place. And I hope, and I think a lot of us hope, that the ANC doesn't allow its policy conference to be dominated, as we've seen in the other conferences, simply by internal factional battles. But in the case of this step-aside policy, it's clear that there is a momentum that's gaining after the KZN Provincial Congress in particular, where there's a desire for this policy conference to come out and recommend to the ANC Elective Conference to push the step-aside rule and get rid of it. So it will be, because people's careers are on the line, people's leadership potentials and possibilities are on the line. So it's going to be at the center unfortunately, of the internal policy debates, I'm sure, at this conference.
When you take a look at what it will take by the end of this conference to say it has been a progressive one, are there any particular markers, areas of interest, conversations that you're going to be looking out for?
Sure. I think if the ANC is serious about policy issues, then clearly there are several. One would be we haven't seen any movement, for example, after all the big brouhaha, land reform and nationalization, it's died down. And yet it still remains a fundamental issue. Agricultural issues, food production issues, energy issues, obviously, around ESCOM and provision of basic services, the dysfunction at local government and how that's affecting, obviously, the provision of those basic services. These are all immigration issues which have now become a political hot potato as well and are creating a lot of conflict in our society. I think these would be amongst several others, but these would hopefully be at the center of the policy discussions that the ANC is going to have.
Pule Mabe talks about the fact that throughout this weekend, South Africans will get the sense that the ANC is serious about coming back in 2024 by virtue of the issues that they raise. You know, you've just touched on the issue of land, the issue of immigration, which have been really big talking points in this country since the previous election cycle. How much of that do you think is going to weigh in on the conversations that are taking place, especially when there they consider. What else it is some of the new entrants, if I can describe them as that, into the political space have been saying and doing in relation to those issues?
Well, I think the key question for that animates the ANC policy discussion is, are they going to go the populist route and basically sort of kowtow in some ways to a populism that might get them a few extra votes? I mean, that would be, for example, on issues of immigration and foreign nationals and other things like that, and obviously the land reform issues. Or are they going to pivot back towards some of their own moral sort of center and their own principles and values that made them quite popular for a long period of time and got them the electoral support they had? So I think that's the ideological question. And then the practical question on the policy is, the big elephant in the policy room is declining electoral support. You can have all the policies in the world, you can adopt them, but if you're losing electoral support, then you're not going to be in a position to implement them. And so the ANC is going to have to pay, and I hope that they will pay attention, and what will animate their discussions is, what do the people need and what do they want? And what is going to, it's not simply, if they do that, then they will begin to pivot towards gaining back some of that popular support. I am not, I don't cross my fingers on that front. I don't hold my breath necessarily, given the track record of the last few ANC conferences, but we can at least hope that that would be the case if the ANC is serious of not just about their own policies, but about the implementation of them that will benefit the vast majority of South Africans who are suffering at this stage tremendously from a range of different issues.
The ANC has always prided itself in being what it describes as a broad church. You talk about populist narratives that have become part of our political discourse, and this weekend also being about which direction the party will take. Where then does that leave the room for multiplicity of ideas in this broad church?
Well, I don't think there's any, one doesn't cancel out the other. You can have engaging debates, you can have disagreements, and that's to be expected. But I think where it crosses a line is when those disagreements and debates become factional, internal political battles for position and power. And that's when people turn off. If they feel as though the ANC is grappling with real serious issues and there are many different ideological positions, fair enough, and you come to a consensus. But if they feel as though what's being done is people are performing in order to be able to get themselves into positions, in order to be able to win their factional battles in the ANC, people will then turn off against the ANC, and this is what's cost them the support. So the ANC Policy Conference has got to take policy seriously, not just, and the other key thing that we haven't talked about is the policy of organizational renewal itself. I mean, this is the other issue. It's not just the external policies, but the internal ones as well. And we'll see. I mean, the proof is going to be in what they do, not in what they say.
The feedback, at least if you listen to what former President Thabo Mbeki had to say a couple of weeks ago on where the party is on this journey and path of renewal, is quite scathing, because he says 4.5 years after the fact, he still doesn't see any tangible changes of the party working towards this reform, at least not in the way that has been documented.
Well, I think we have to say that ex-President Thabo Mbeki is doing a bit of cherry picking when it comes to his critiques, because one can go back in terms of the ANC, let's take economic policy, and there's been a lot of critique of the ANC's economic policies from the time that he was president that have not changed at all. What he's referring to, I imagine, is the organizational renewal issues, the corruption, the state capture issues, and other things. And in that case, those are fair critiques. But I think in this case, what the ANC has to introspectively look at is the trajectory that it's been following for over the last 15 or 20 years. This is not simply about the last few years or about the Ramaphosa or even the Zuma years. It's about the ANC and what it's become as a political party. It has simply lost touch with the people and their needs. And if that is not at the center of the policy discussions and pivoting towards what people are going to need, the ANC will continue to lose that support, and their policy conferences will become less and less important for the average citizen, because they will feel that the ANC is doing it for themselves and not for the public.
Dr. Dale Mckinley is a political analyst. Thanks for your time tonight.